Good evening. Now that Election Day 2023 is over, we are back to our regular public affairs programming here at the college with Inside Government. This is the first of two Inside Governments for tonight. This is a show that is shown on Spectrum, Verizon, Fios, as well as ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, and will be played on Saturday morning on WIN 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are more than delighted to have in the studio today the mayor of the city of Auburn, Michael D. Quill, who is on the eve of finishing his 16th year as mayor of the city of Auburn. Elected in 2007, Mayor Quill has been in this studio at least twice a year, to the best of my knowledge, for each of the 4 terms. And we appreciate you coming into the studio and giving the community updates, but more importantly, working with the students here as well. Yeah. Today, though, will be likely more of a show about reflection than about public policy, though we'll get into maybe 1 or 2 items. We're going to leave that for Jeff Digert for next Tuesday.
Absolutely.
But welcome back.
Thank you.
And congratulations on 16 years.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. I wish I had 16 more in me, but it's time to move on.
So I think we asked this last fall, or maybe we asked it in February when you were here. Why did you decide not to run?
I'm getting old, to be quite honest, as we all are. But it's just it's a good time to pass the torch. We've accomplished many things. There's always one more thing to do, but it's time. My replacement, Councilor Genentino, Mayor-elect Genentino, he's a terrific young man, very knowledgeable, and we're in for a good ride.
So you announced almost a year ago. In fact, it was about this time last year. I think you were off the show before, so it must have been in February. You know, it's been a year. Any regrets on making that decision that early?
Well, it's bittersweet. I'm glad I made my decision, and I will stick with my decision. There's no second thoughts in regards to that. What is anything I've ever done in my life? Maybe I should have done this. Maybe I should have done that. But no regrets, and I'm glad Jimmy is going to be the mayor, and he'll have a great council to work for. And
so what will you do the first Thursday night after January 1st?
Probably work on my genealogy, as I do most of my spare time. I certainly not going to council chambers, and I'm not going to worry about the newspaper or listen to the media. They're all they're terrific people. They've all been.
But you're moving on.
Absolutely. It'll always be. I think you'll agree. It's always in your blood. There's another election. You know, we have presidential elections coming up. Something to keep me busy, but I'm not going to stew and fret about the city of Auburn.
No, I remember my own case. Somebody kept saying, you got to watch this show called Friends. And I had never seen it because it was on a Thursday night. So, and I didn't tape it or anything like that. So, but more importantly to you, what do you and Mrs. Quill have planned? Any plans for the new year?
No, nothing specific. Joan spends a lot of time with our 4 grandchildren. Our oldest one is 16 now. He's learned how to drive, and the youngest one, I think Aslan's in 3rd grade. I'll be in 2nd or 3rd grade. I'll be in trouble because I don't remember. But she does spend a lot of time with the Quill grandchildren. So.
And you've got a grandson, Atticus, who I know very well, and he's a great young man. So I do want to ask you a little bit about the election.
Sure.
Were you surprised locally? I mean, we had, I would say, 3 different types of elections. You had what was going on at City Hall.
Right.
You had what was going on over at the 6th floor of the county legislature. And then you had a 3-way race for county clerk. Any surprises in your view?
There was a couple surprises, and I won't go into what they were or anything, but I was extremely pleased as to how the elections turned out. But there were a couple of surprises for me. And Joan called it right down to my wife Joan, she called it right down to the individual. I better start paying attention to her a little bit better.
So I know in one case, Brian Scanlon is a good friend of the son-in-law of one of your good friends, Dan Curry, who was an assistant chief.
And also Brian was also a firefighter.
And a firefighter, I was going to say. So that's a guy who served under you at one point.
Yes. Yep.
Any thoughts on that particular race, other than it was?
That was really surprising. It's tough, as you know, for a Democrat. And Brian's not a Democrat, but usually out in the county, the Republicans usually win handily.
I think the last one that I can think of would be Tom Leone.
Yep.
And I remember it was the old red pickup truck. He said he spent a lot of time up in Fairhaven
Yeah.
at that time. Have you, I know there's a story in the Citizen, so when I wrote this question, it was a little earlier this morning.
Okay.
You've started a transition with Jimmy Giannantino?
Correct.
So you had a meeting. Who was at the meeting that you had the other day?
We had Councilor Giannantino, Councilor Cuddy, myself, I believe Councilor Kent was there, and our two council-elect person.
People. So,
People.
Rhoda Overstreet
Rhoda
Wilson and Christine Calarco, again, someone who you most likely has known longer than most people because you served under Chief Calarco.
And Frank and I we're still, I always consider him a good friend, but we were very close one point, working with the firefighters union and different things. And then we both started going up to the ranks.
So for all three, for the two new counselors, they did not serve in city government. One served on the school board, one served in the county legislature for a short time. So it's most likely a bigger transition for them.
Correct.
But for Jimmy Giannantino, it's moving from one of those four chairs at the base of the podium to your chair. What type of transition are you doing with him? Are you doing anything specifically with him?
We had a meeting last week with the city manager, the clerk, myself, a couple of council members, not where we had a quorum, but we met, went over a few things just so they're aware of. They have been attending and watching a lot of our council meetings, so they're going to come up to speed very rapidly if they're not already there.
So the normal question I think that is asked of candidates is, well, how will you be the same as the person you're trying to replace? How will Jimmy Giannantino be different from you?
I really believe the person should be different than the one they are replacing. The biggest thing is Jimmy is much younger than myself. He has a completely separate or different group of friends and associates than I do, but there again, it's age related. So
I do want to ask you a little bit about politics in itself. Were you surprised Tim Lattimore ran again?
Probably no.
Were you surprised at how badly Republicans did? I'm not only talking in the city, it's traditional, but in the city, the county, and countywide. With one, I know there's one race that's in absentees, one race for the legislature they clearly won, it looks like, but the two other seats they won were because nobody ran against the Republicans. What happened to the Republicans? Not that they want advice from
me,
a longtime Democrat.
I have no idea. I guess I would have to say this. I really don't know what happened locally, but I think it reflects what's going on nationally. I think all politics are in somewhat of a state of disarray, and the cohesiveness, the working together, just isn't there anymore. You know yourself. You were mayor for years in the city, and you worked with both sides. You didn't work with this one because they were Republican or Democrat.
And you've been working, from all reports, we've heard nothing but really solid reports about Councilor LaCastro and working as a sole Republican. But when I look at it, and I look at history, I think there are only, during your tenure, there's most likely only been 2, maybe 3, Republicans who've been elected in 16 years.
I can Mr. Camardo, Mr. Rizika.
Oh, 4, okay.
Yeah.
So,
not to interrupt you, but I was tailing up. I thought you were going to ask this, so I'll tell you anyway. In my time as mayor, I worked with 12 different city council members.
okay.
Right.
So in doing this, you stayed somewhat quiet. No, you stayed very quiet during this election. Was that a conscious decision?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Why?
The mayor and councilors have to be their own people. If they had asked, and I was glad they didn't, I would have done whatever I could for any one of them. But it's their time to make their mark and show who they are, that they're not White Quill's puppet. They're not listening to White Quill. They have to be on their own, and very proud of that.
The reason I asked that, because I think to a certain degree, you were the third person in this, the third candidate in the studio when we did the mayor's forum 2 weeks ago. I say that only in the way that your name kept coming up, really in 4 different areas. I think there were 4 things, but it kind of included you. It obviously included Mr. Giannantino for Mr. Lattimore. But for one thing that came up was, not that it's your fault, you're not putting a bandana across your face, but there was the accusation that crime is up.
Yeah.
And that especially from pre-COVID numbers. Do you think crime is up?
It's where I wish it was much lower, but I think it all ties in with everything nationally. In really getting in depth, after COVID, everything in my mind has been turned upside down. The norms are not the norms any longer. And folks watch Washington, not so much Albany, but Washington. It's in such disarray, so many arguments, and I think people are uncomfortable. They're not sure of anything. They're very leery. I wish I could put a handle on it. I do.
So the second item that was surprising to me that came up was whether this was a good place or a bad place to do business in, especially since you've been the mayor that has shepherded through, it's been your tenure, Restore New York,
Right.
As well as some downtown business improvements.
Right.
So, and I know part of this comes from this Wallet Hub website
Okay.
that came out in October that said Auburn was a bad place to do business. Is that your view?
Absolutely not. Not because I'm the mayor. I've been a lifelong resident here, and this is where I plan to stay for the remainder of my days. I think Auburn's a great place to live, to work, to enjoy life. You go through downtown or go to a local restaurant on the weekend, they're always crowded. Everyone could always do more.
But do you think that in itself, that the restaurant, let's just pick on the restaurants, because I
Sure.
think that's what people visualize when they think of business.
Yeah.
They don't think of a Tessie Plastic necessarily. They most likely should,
Yep.
or an A-Frame, or Nucor, or a number of other businesses.
Right.
But they drive through downtown. Would you say that downtown between 2007 and November 2023 is markedly different?
Absolutely. For the better. For the better.
Another one that came up was that you all aren't doing enough to protect our drinking water.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
my assumption is you disagree with that.
I absolutely. Between Councilor Cuddy and Mayor-elect Giannantino, we had a meeting probably 2 weeks before the election with state representatives. In Councilor Giannantino, Mayor-elect now, excuse me, he did a remarkable job. He had all the facts, figures, all in his head. He knew exactly what he was talking about. He was very well prepared. There's a lot more that can be done, but we can't do it all on our own. We need some help from the state government. We need the state to listen to us.
And I think part of the issue that came up in the campaign was that you had written, you and I think Ed Wagner, the supervisor in Owasco, he was not criticized during this whole period of time.
He's a good man.
He's a good man, and a friend of the college as well. But one of the things that was made clear is that you had made a pleading case to the governor that they need to do more. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. That's correct.
So the last one, and we're going to deal more with this with Jeff Digert, who will be here next Tuesday. The other item that got slung around a lot was this issue of the ambulance service.
Yes, yes.
You're in the budding stages.
Yes.
I don't think it's been operational for a year now, has it?
I'd say it's close, but I don't believe it is.
So, is it a drain on the city financially?
No, it's paying for itself. It is paying for itself. In my mind, it's paying for itself. It's a service that's needed. You have to keep in mind the people that are chirping in the background did have the ambulance service, and we were losing considerable amount of money. I don't want to go any further, but off the record, I'll talk all you want about it.
But one of the issues is right now is just about reimbursements from insurance companies, correct, and collections.
Collection, they're so long in coming. The medical billing system, the upkeep on ambulances, regardless of who it is. So I'm concerned about what the county is going to do. I see that SAVES is stepping up. They may be helping, but there's still a large area of the county that needs a little closer.
But that wouldn't occur whether there was a city ambulance service or not?
Regardless.
Okay.
Regardless.
So let's,
And I'll just leave
Go
it
ahead.
at this. I think a lot of the undercurrent about the ambulance is sour grapes. And I'll just
Okay.
leave it there.
so let's talk about 16 years.
Sure.
If you could think of something that you wished we had been able to get done, or you were able to get done, what hadn't you accomplished in 16 years that I just wish we had gone a little farther on this?
There's nothing that from day to day, week to week, there's things that'll keep you awake at night, but there's nothing that I look back on thinking like that. There's nothing I wish we had done. I've worked with 3 city managers since I became mayor. 2 of them were the best city managers we've ever had in my mind. They were wonderful men to work with. They were very knowledgeable. They were patient. They understood what our problems were and how to correct them. They were.
Do you want to
terrific.
name them?
Mr. Selby and Mr. Digert, they were fantastic. They
Okay.
really-
I know you. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Jeff and I worked together in the fire department, and when Doug Selby left, I asked who should we get as an interim basis.
And you had overlapped with Mark Palish. He was hired
Yes.
by a previous administration.
Yep.
You mentioned Jeff Digert. He has been city manager now 7 years, if I'm doing my math correctly. So he, and if I'm doing my other math correctly, he is the second longest city manager in city history,
Really?
possibly,
Okay.
at this point. You've had a great working relationship with him. City managers do not, on average, nationwide, forget Auburn,
Right.
there was a period of time they lasted about a year,
Right.
it seemed.
Yeah.
Do you see him continuing for the next couple of years, or 7 years is a long time for both nationally and for Auburn?
I cannot speak for Jeff. I would hope that he does stay on, but at the same time, I'm going to be out of the center ring there. It's not my job, but I have not heard anything where he may be looking, or he has been looking, or whatever. I think he's happy there. It's a tough job. You know, it's a tough job, and but he's been remarkable with the employees and all the problems.
He's relatively young, he's in his 50s.
Yes. Yep.
What do you think the most serious challenge facing the next city council will be?
Water is right at the top of the list. It's something we have to do. Something we're investing a lot of money in our wastewater treatment, also water purification. It's the things that people really don't see every day. If the streets aren't plowed, people notice that and get upset. But the water coming in, the water going out, that's going to be our biggest challenge.
And I know during the campaign, somebody questioned whether Auburn's drinking water was safe. Is Auburn's drinking water safe?
I drink it every day.
Okay.
It's absolute.
You're not a bottle, not a Wegmans bottle at your house?
No, and
Okay.
our grandchildren, who none of them live in the city of Auburn, they drink the water, and it's safe. It needs constant watching and constant upgrades, but I'm very comfortable with our water.
So I want to talk a little bit about something you're most likely not going to be comfortable talking about, and that's you.
Yeah.
So,
Heck of a nice guy.
heck of a nice guy. I think people would say that.
Yeah,
I don't think they would say there's a harsh word about you.
they don't know me well.
Okay.
Uh,
But you haven't been known to make outbursts at city council. You don't stomp around. You don't slam doors.
No, I try not to. I really do.
So what do you think your legacy will be?
I hope it's along the lines of I'll never forget old Mike. What's his name? So I didn't do it for the glory. I love this community. I was raised here. I wish my children lived here, but they moved other places. But I still have a large family
But
here.
your son still practices law in the city of Auburn.
He lives just
Outside.
outside the city, but someone will be calling you that my son does not live in the city. So I want to clarify that. I've really enjoyed living here. When I enlisted in the Marine Corps, I left for 4 years, and I had serious thoughts about not coming back to Auburn. And I came back to Auburn, and I stayed a week, and then I stayed 2 weeks, and then I really never left. And I enjoy going on vacation. I won't deny that. But Auburn's, I'll always love Auburn. It'll always be a part of it.
What do you think the high point in 16 years has been? And re-elections don't count.
No, the people we hired, whether directly as city employees or contractors where our troops are not capable of doing, the improvement to the streets, the improvement to downtown, improvement to the neighborhoods, everything needs freshening. It's a constant battle. But through the city management, through our city employees, we've taken some major steps.
Is there a flip side? What may have been the lowest point in 16 years?
Nothing that, we have the constant, for example, the water. Well, the worries about the water is constant. The housing. Our housing needs some help. But if you look around, if you talk with other mayors, watch the news, we're not out on an island by ourselves. Rochester's having the same thing, Syracuse, Geneva. People want to live in nice homes, apartments, where I believe that, but they don't always have the money, the extra money to maybe paint a coat on it or clean up the yard or whatever. Everyone has their priorities and everyone has a X amount of dollars in the bank to work with. So I wish we could do more to turn some of these neighborhoods around, and we are. Mr. Dygert has a great plan he's working on presently. But if you take a look, for example, Orchard Street, Upper Orchard Street, many years ago, it wasn't where you really would want to bring people to invest in Auburn. But now I enjoy driving
investment
through it.
from the city, home headquarters,
Absolutely.
the Allens,
Yep.
the foundation, a number of others
Yeah.
who've been involved in that.
And not to interrupt, but Barber Street is going to be, in the next year or two, is going to be going the same direction. It needs a boost, and I think we're going to be able to
For
pull
those
it
who
off.
don't remember, that's over by Balloons, over by
Correct.
the state prison. Where's the investment coming from?
It's different pots of money, both state and federal, locally.
So community development, block grant, money will go.
Something along those lines, yeah. I don't want to tell you exactly yes and then be wrong.
Okay,
Say-
no, that's
yeah.
fine. No, Jeff Dygert will correct you next week.
That's okay.
And I know he would never do that, so at least not in public. So being mayor is, it's a weird seat because you're high above everyone else
Yeah.
to a certain degree, but you also get to vote last.
Yes.
Which sometimes is a good thing because you can see the lay of the land and your vote may not count if that. But is there any vote you remember you say, you know what, I was the deciding vote and it was a tough vote and I still needed to make this vote even though it might have been unpopular?
Nothing that comes to mind. You may have something
No,
to
no.
jog my. No, usually, personally, if you do your homework and you look at what the agenda is because we receive it on Friday for the following week, and if I have any questions, as well as council, staff is always available, and sometimes you just have to do some soul searching on your own. But Mr. Dygert is very good of bringing us up to speed and basically telling us where we're going.
So you mentioned those packets,
Yeah.
and I know sometimes it's always fun when you get to a meeting. Sometimes you'll see some counselors, you'll see it's well thumbed. There will be little sticky notes. I remember this of the late Ann Bunker and Mark Vandrick were
Both attorneys.
both attorneys, and
Yeah.
they marked everything else up. But there were also those who showed up on Thursday night and were looking for a letter opener
Yeah.
to open up the packet.
Well, we've changed that.
we've-
Everyone has an iPad now.
So it's
or-
electronic, so you don't know.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be to the two new counselors? Again, somebody who you most likely knew since she was born,
Yeah.
and Christine Calarco.
Yes.
Dr. Overstreet, maybe a little Overstreet Wilson, maybe a little later in life.
Yeah.
But what would your advice be to them as they come into City Hall?
Don't be afraid to do your homework before you commit. Don't do your homework before Thursday evening. Talk with Mr. Dygert and the staff. I would suggest if they're going to talk with staff, just to give Mr. Dygert a heads up that you're going to do this. Not that it's forbidden, but talk with the staff. Ask them what they're thinking. Is this the right
Surprise
way?
makes great headlines, but it doesn't necessarily make good public policy.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I want to ask you a couple pieces of advice for you, from
Sure.
you. So if someone has never thought of running for City Hall, or maybe they are, and the next election's another 700 days away, 700 plus days away. What advice do you give to somebody who comes to you and says, you know, Mayor, because you'll be called that the rest of your life,
Yeah.
or Chief in your
Or,
case,
or a couple other names.
or a couple other things. What would you tell somebody who wants to run for office?
Go, if, for example, city council or even the school board, go sit in the meetings. And there's always an agenda out. It comes out earlier in the week. Look at the agenda, think about it, think what your thoughts are about it. Talk with the counselors, ask them what their opinion is. Do your homework. Prepare
So it's more
yourself.
important that people go to a meeting to see what it's like first, though.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you have had a lifetime of public service. You mentioned the fire department, you were in the Marines, you obviously did 16 years at City Hall. In general, what would you tell somebody, whether they want to work in the public eye, whether it's an elected position, but more importantly, if you want to become a city employee? What should you be thinking about?
There's times you need a thick skin, because you are working for the general public, so to speak. It's not always peaches and cream, but it's very, very rewarding. It is. Just accomplishing anything and having your family, your descendants say, geez, Mike was involved with it, Grandpa was involved with it, or whatever. It's very rewarding. It's stressful. It's time consuming, but it's worth every bit of it.
So let me ask you the flip side,
Sure.
because nobody ever comes to City Hall to complain,
No.
ever.
No. Except for the front door that we felt was necessary,
Sorry.
but yes.
Well, I'm not going to get into the front
Yeah.
door. So if somebody wants to fight City Hall,
Yes.
what advice do you give them?
Do your research. Know what you're talking about. Don't get on the computer and see what your neighbors are saying or whatever. Go to City Hall. Talk with the mayor. Talk with the council members. Talk with the city clerk. Get your evidence together. Understand what you're talking about, why you think it's wrong, and then move forward talking with the council or the mayor. But do your background work. It happens quite often. People come in, they're all upset about this or that, and you try to explain to them, that's really not what's happening. Oh no, don't confuse me, I know it's happening, so.
So you've been here at least 35 times when I started going through the list, at least with me in the studio, which has been great. But I want to ask you, do you have anything you want to tell the public as we close out about your thoughts about your service, or more importantly about them?
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Well,
I'm not one to go off on a tangent. I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed everything I've done. It's like any job. There's days you really don't want to be there, but all in all, it's been a great life.
I always used to say Thursday nights were my favorite and least favorite day of the week.
Yeah, yeah.
It depends on what was the end of the agenda.
Well, it depends on when the gavel comes down. That's when Thursday begins. So.
Exactly. So we also want to thank you not only for, like I said, 35 plus times being here in the studio. I know the next guest would like to beat your record, but I'm sure he'll have a comment or two about that. But I also want to thank you for your willingness to come on and answer questions, especially when sometimes it hasn't been easy. There have been some times where you've been put on the spot, and we appreciate you not only talking to the public, but also being here for our students, and we want to thank you for that. We also want to wish you and Mrs. Quill well.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we look forward to hearing what the next chapter of your lives are.
Well, I don't think we're going far from Auburn, to be quite honest. We're going to be around for hopefully a long time, but with Weedsport and two in Marcellus, we're not going far. So.
Well, thank you again for
right,
everything
you.
you've done. We will be back with his challenger, Auburn Superintendent of Schools, Jeff Perazzola, who would like to take the crown of being most often guest in just a moment, so please stick around. We'll also be back on Thursday with David Gould, the chairman of the Cuyahoga County Legislature, who is retiring at the end of the year as well. He did decide not to seek re-election. We're going to talk to him about his county budget and also his public service. Again, almost as lengthy as a career as Mayor Quill. And then we will have Assemblyman John Lamondas, as well as Cuyahoga County's Director of Health Education and Public Information, Deborah Pickering. And we're going to be talking about tobacco efforts, both locally and statewide, and anti-tobacco efforts locally. And as I mentioned, we'll be back next week with Jeff Dygert, the city manager for our show, and then we'll also have a discussion on Beyond the Front Page with the proposed new homeless facility on Grant Avenue. If you'd like, you can send us your questions for future guests or send us ideas for who to have on in the future. You can send them to cozguytho@aol.com. But I'm Guy Cosentino for Cuyahoga Community College. We want to thank you for watching tonight. Stick around for Jeff Perazzola, and otherwise we'll see you on Thursday. But in the between, be safe.